is there such thing as a purely objective world? Is it all representation at some level? Is there a very objective world with, lots of interesting things in it, and we more or less understand it correctly as it is? Like, where do you sit on that spectrum?
Everything that looks real, everything that has the property of being experientiable at some level, that can be subject of experience, is going to be constructed inside of your mind. There is this issue that it's not you that is constructing it, because you are a story inside of that mind about that agent. But this I is not the agent. The I is the representation of the agent inside of the system. And what we can say about the universe, it seems to be generating patterns. These patterns seem to be independent of what we want them to be, right? So it's not that all of these patterns seem to be originating in our mind. At least this is not a model that makes very good predictions. And there seem to be other minds that seem to be able to perceive similar patterns, but in a different projection. And the projection is being done by the mind that is trying to explain the patterns. So the universe is projecting some patterns at your systemic interface, at your thalamus or at your retina and body surface or wherever you draw the line. And then you have a nervous system behind this, or some kind of other information processing system. And our best model is that it's a nervous system that is identifying regularities in these patterns. And part of these regularities are, for instance, things. Things don't exist independently of our decomposition of the universe into things. This doesn't mean that the decomposition is completely arbitrary, because our mind makes it based on what's salient and what compresses well. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, there is just this unified state vector of the universe that is progressing. And you make it predictable by splitting it up into things, into separate entities that you model independently of each other in your mind, and they exchange information, thereby change each other object's evolution. And this is how we get to causality and so on. But for instance, causality doesn't exist independently of the decomposition of the universe into things, which has to be done by a mind.
Well, I'm curious as to why you say what there really is this this unified evolving state vector. I mean, how do you know?
Like, I don't. So this is the easiest explanation. I have difficulty to make it simpler than that. But the separation of the universe into objects seems to be performed by the observing mind. Right? The alternatives don't make sense. So the description of the universe as a set of states that changes is the most basic one. And then I can say it seems that I can take the set of states and organize it as it was a space. Right? There's a certain way to project the state vector. You get to a space, to something that's multidimensional, by taking your number line and folding it up, for instance, into a lattice. And you can make this with a number of operators, and then you can have information traveling in this lattice, and then you usually get to something like particles. And if the particles don't have a distinct location and you just describe the trend of particles going, then you have fields. But they all require additional language that you need to introduce and additional assumptions. And also we find that they're all not true, in the sense that there is a level of description where reality and description fall apart from each other. So for instance, the idea of describing the universe as a Minkowski space works relatively well at certain scales, but if you go below these scales, you get singularities, or in certain regions of the universe, you get singularities, and you realize you're not living in space. You can just describe the dynamics at a certain scale, usually as space. Same thing is true for particles. Right? Particles are a way to talk about how information travels between the locations that you can discern in the state vector. So the thing that I'm sometimes frustrated with philosophers is that they somehow think that the notions that they got in high school physics are somehow objectively given. And they know electrons, and physicists know what electrons are, and there's a good understanding, and we touch them every day, and then we build information processing on top of the electrons. And this is just not true. It's the other way around, right?